What happened when he studied Hadith in Basra and Kufa, he actually lost some of his notes. He himself said that I studied Hadith with Amash and I got a full nuskha of Hadith Amash. But that nuskha was lost from me, so I used to narrate Hadith of Amash from my memory. Similarly, Hadith of Thabit, he could not keep them well. So because he is very much, there is a problem for Muhaddithin in Hadith of Ma'mar when he narrates from the people of Iraq, whenever he narrates. And that's why Bukhari never accepted Hadith of Ma'mar from Thabit except in Mu'allaqa, in Ta'liqat. And Muslim only accepted Hadith of Ma'mar from Thabit istishhadan, in Mutaba'a. And this Hadith is Hadith of Usul. This is the reason. You see how deep they go. It looks for a person, big, no, these Hadith, it should be in Bukhari Muslim. Shahin or Shafti Shahan, and people like in the Kathir, they said. And then in our time, everybody actually, all these big people, Musahihin, they just rush for something like that. That I don't like, because they don't go little deeper. The reason basically is Ma'amar to Imam, but for the Hadith of Iraq, there is a problem in this Hadith. That's why Bukhari, Muslim, they are so careful. So Hadith could be Sahih. I don't deny the Hadith Sahih, but what I'm denying it is not Allah Shafti Shahan, not that condition. So anyway, there can be some more research done, but when you do research, first try to understand what those people have done. Then do research, we'd appreciate that. But without full research really, things like that, anybody can now Shaykh al-Albani, for example, he found 15 weak hadith in Muslim. Now everybody knows, even the closest student of Ibn Albani, that is a mistake. They never can defend him, because that was a big mistake. We don't understand the methodology of Muslim, and he did that mistake. All hadith of Zawir and Jabir, which is not in Sahih of Layth and Sa'ad, and where there is no Haddathna or Samatu, all this is weak for him. This is not how things work in the field of hadith. He should have known this thing. To see all these people, like Shaykh Ahmad Shakir, his commentary of Tirmidhi, there are hadiths where he said that, this is not very fine, it should be Bukhari Muslim. And I have been teaching and also I've been more research, and I found really, none of the hadiths which is said ala Shafti Shaykhan, is ala Shafti Shaykhan. Every hadith got a problem. There's illah actually. That's why I'm really thinking that this book by Hakim Abu Abdullah Nasaburi, al-Mustadrak al-Sahihain, actually, which he said that these hadiths are ala Shafti Shaykhan. And my thinking is, none of them are ala Shafti Shaykhan. I want really to write, if I have time, Ilalu wa Hadith al-Mustadrak, to prove really that none of them are on the condition of Bukhari Muslim.
Hakim in Mustadrak, he says that the Shaykhain are not on their track anyway. The Shaykhain, they don't stick to their shurut. Al-Hakim in Mustadrak, he says the Shaykhain are not able to stick to their own shurut anyway.
Who said?
Hakim.
What Hakim has done, let's understand properly. What actually happening is, in the time of the Hakim, when he's in Naishapur, in Khurasan, what actually basically happening is, there are people of Kalam, and there are Mu'tazila, there are Ashaira, there are big tension and competition going on really. And all of them really say that, hadith, you see, they're very little anyway, Sahih hadith. All this, big traveling and all those things, at the end of the day, Bukhari was nothing else. Hakim was to prove that Bukhari, Muslim, they only have got some Sahih hadith, there are many more which are Sahih. So he is actually writing with that thinking that to prove that there are many more hadith. What Hakim has done mistake really, in order to boost that there are so many more, what he has done really, he did not make a difference between two things. Sahih hadith and Sahih and the Shurut of Shaykhain. What he has got it, we don't deny some of them are Sahih, no doubt about that really, though others are not. But none of them are ala Shafti Shaykhain. And also, the problem actually is when you look at Hakim, in somewhere else, he's really very, he's really, professional, he knows the hadith. But somehow, in his book really, he's not so strong. So some people say, he got the draft, but before actually revising the book, he died. Something like that. But whatever the case actually is, the book of the Hakim is not on his standard. No doubt about that really. This was, but otherwise, Muslim and Bukhari, their conditions really, they are so clear for anybody who reads their book. If you don't read the book, only read Usul Hadith, you never can find their condition. The conditions only can be known when you read the book directly yourself really. You can see it. Because people of the Usul, later on, from Salah and later on really, just keep saying same thing again and again without checking really what they have done. You need, because book is there. Read Bukhari, read Muslim. After 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you'll find actually what they're doing. But don't try to understand them from the books of the Usul Hadith, because they don't do justice with them.
Thank you once again.
But I think there is something else.
I would also like to reiterate and say thank you on behalf of everyone. In the Quran, I'm paraphrasing, it says, if you don't know, ask those who know. Having been on a journey to find what is Al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah for over 10 years, I've recently come to the conclusion that there's two things that I need to follow: fiqh, the soul of Quran, and that's original fiqh, i.e. following the madhab, and also following the spiritual path that's connected and goes back. I think the problem that we are facing is not from Orientalists, but rather I feel that there's a problem within the Muslim community now, i.e. on how hadiths are interpreted. And there's new age movements that are not like yourself. I'm not going to mention, so just so not to cause division, but my understanding is for centuries, lay people like many of us followed a madhab, and that was the given. So if we didn't know, we could refer to a madhab. Even Imam Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, who agrees.
Brother, sorry, is this hadith related?
Yes, absolutely. I'll just get into my question.
Okay.
Even Imam Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, who have recently come to the conclusion, is greatly misinterpreted. Imam Taymiyyah, who's greatly misinterpreted, was like the Qadri Sufi and also a Hanbali. In recent times, we've had people challenging whether we should follow Quran and Sunnah, like you've mentioned before, and we've even had new age movements attacking.
Brother, wrap up the question, please, quick.
Sure. Attacking like the likes of Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah. Surely the madness and the violence and the reactionary movements today comes from this new interpretation of Islam. I wanted to get your opinion on this.
I don't see a hadith connection to that, really, unless you want to spin it.
The hadith connection is really, people are interpreting hadiths now.
We might come back to that. Unless you want to answer that, Shaykh Akram or Dr. Brill. Okay, thank you. Dr. Mansour.
I just want to ask a question about the usul al-hadith itself. When you use the word usul al-hadith, in particular, we have a particular image, a particular understanding in our mind. For example, the Khatib Baghdadi in our mind, and Shaykh Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani in our mind. I was just wondering that this usul al-hadith, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that is it due to the educational force of Imam Shafi'i's argument for the centrality of hadith, which kind of bolstered his methodology to the level of a super theory, that when we actually talk about the word usul al-hadith, the only image that comes in our mind is actually Shafi'i usul al-hadith, that usul al-hadith is actually an usul al-hadith which is Shafi'i, whereas there are other competing usul al-hadith. For example, during the time of Imam Shafi'i, Ibn Abbad had wrote a response to Imam Shafi'i, Isa ibn Aban wrote a response to Imam Shafi'i. In modern times, Maulana Zufar Ahmad Uthmani wrote a massive book, I'La al-Sunan, and the basis of that book is that nobody has monopoly of usul al-hadith, and usul al-hadith is ijtihadi, therefore we Hanafis have the right to define the boundaries. I mean, this question is to both. I'm just trying to talk about this. This usul al-hadith, has it been essentialized or?
I mean, I would just say that, that this is a question that has nothing to do with whether hadith are authentic. So this is a specialist question. There's nothing wrong with the question. This is a specialist question that has absolutely nothing to do with greater issues. First, that's an important thing to say. So anybody who doesn't care about the special stuff can turn their brain off right now. The rest. The issue, Mustalah al-Hadith is basically a Shafi'i genre. If you look at people who write this book, the vast majority of the books are by Shafis. Sometimes there are a few Hanafis, but it's not really that interesting. Al-Bukhari has a commentary on this, has another. But it's really, and you're right, it's not, Hanafis can say whatever they want about it. Tahawi, Abu Ja'far Tahawi died in 321, 932, is really a Hanafi who's saying, here's my take on hadith. Someone like Ibn Abd al-Bar in his Kitab al-Tawhid, same thing. So that's fine. I have no problem with that. But that's why I don't actually recommend people read these Mustalahat al-Hadith books. They're not very useful. I mean, if you really want to understand hadith, they're not useful. You should just read the original books and commentaries. These Mustalah books are, they just become kind of a curriculum exercise.
You know, these books are mustalahat really. You know, they are useful in one sense that you get some sense, you know, of the history, how people used to think about, you know, development of the hadith science, how to authenticate. To no doubt for the beginners, we need really something like that. But one thing keep in mind really, when these later usul book have been written really, you know, it is not that they have done the full research of the methods of all the muhaddithin and they got those usul. No. But if you really look very, very closely, you know, for the muhaddithin later on, these two books became the easiest thing, Bukhari and Muslim. They basically all the definition of the Sahih Hadith or Hasan Hadith, whatever actually is, it is basically based on the way of the Bukhari Muslim. But there used to be, as you mentioned, there used to be other definitions as well, even in the time Bukhari Muslim really, because there are Hadith Sahih in Tirmidhi, and Imam Tirmidhi himself actually sometimes quotes Bukhari, and he said, I asked Imam Bukhari, and he said, this is Sahih. But that Sahih does not exist in Sahih Bukhari. It is Sahih, but it is not there, and you can find the illah for that. You can find that there used to be Hadith Sahih, even Bukhari or maybe Muslim, they will accept as Sahih, though they did not include them in their book. That makes very clear the definition of Hadith Sahih is more general than just what is in Sahih Bukhari Muslim. And that why really my thinking is that when people talk about actually the word Sahih, we should talk about al-Hadith al-Maqbul and Ghair al-Maqbul. Hadith al-Maqbul actually is something which really has been developing in the century. What is Hadith al-Maqbul in Medina and Kufa at the end of the 1st century and the 2nd century, it is something different from what actually has been developed by the people of Basra at the end of 2nd century and what has been picked up by Imam Shafi at that time, and then which what became popular in the Hadith circles in Baghdad because of Hanbal and then Bukhari Muslim. It actually there has been development. But anyway, the definition of the Sahih, what exists now in the book of Usul Hadith from Muqaddimah and Salah or Ibn Asmani's works and other clothes, that definition taken all the 5 conditions really. When they say Hadith Sahih, what is narrated by Adl, from another Adl, which who has got the dhabt, and then ittisal, mattasala isnaduhu, برواية عدل عن عدل ضابط عن ضابط مثله غير معلل ولا شاذ. 5 conditions: اتصال, عدالة, ضبط, and that is not معلل, it is not shad. This definition Sahih really is only a kind to Sahih Bukhari Muslim. There are so many hadiths which are mu'allal and shad, and they are in Tirmidhi and Abu Dawud and Muhaddithin accept them Sahih. And that why actually people like many Hanafis actually are in this thing. Maulana Zafar Thanavi, when he wrote his book Qawaid Ulum al-Hadith, they make very clear that for example this thing when hadith is shad could be kind of Bukhari Muslim is not Sahih. But according to Hanafi people, all well actually, hadith shad has been sahih. What we say actually, there are two sahih. One is shad and one is ma'ruf. So there can be both can be sahih. Or one is mahfud. The mahfud and shad or munkar and ma'ruf. Both can be sahih. So Hanafi people say this thing is not up to muhaddithin to decide which one is sahih. They have to leave actually that both are sahih. Now fuqaha will decide which one to accept or not to accept. So no doubt, as I said really, that in the matter of the hadith sahih or hasan daif, it is not as simple as it looks like. And it was not agreed upon by all the people in Kufa and Basra and Makkah and Medina, as later on people thought. But what happens later on the books of the Usul Hadith, as Professor Jonathan said very rightly, written actually by many Shafi scholars. So somehow, a Risala's impact actually is there, and also impact of Bukhari Muslim on those definitions. But that is not the only thing how most muhaddithin used to think about those Usul.
There's a sister right on the left hand side, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
And Tariq afterwards.
Yeah, I wanted Professor Brown to answer this one. Dr. Nadwi can also. I know you've been trying to avoid the theory for review, saying that you don't study history and everything, but it's a question that I want an answer to. So very briefly, if possible, what do you say to their claims that all this hadith thing is corrupted, and I like to say based on forging it, and also that their claims that Maliki, Shafi'i, and I don't know how many Hanafi were all taught by one of their imams, Jafar Sadiq, to speak.
Jafar al-Sadiq died in 765. He's a figure who's venerated by Sunnis and Shias alike. So 12 Shiites believe that he had their vision of law and dogma, and Sunnis think he did not have that vision of law and dogma. So he's, I suppose, sort of a mannequin on which you can put whatever clothes you want. Keep both groups venerated. In terms of what do I think about the Shiite claims that tremendous number of a good percentage of the Sunni Hadith tradition is unreliable and made up. I mean, I don't agree with it. I personally don't agree with it. But again, I think that I'm such a terrible person to ask these questions. So, my mother was an anthropologist. I think I get too into different mindsets. So, I mean, I think that if you accept the Shiite version of Islamic history, then it makes sense. If you don't accept that vision of Islamic history, it doesn't make sense. So I mean, it kind of depends what your point of view is, and because I mean, if you believe that the Islam is sort of defined by the Quran doesn't give you any evidence that you should be Shiite, as far as I know. I've read it many times, and I've never found anything that suggests I should believe in Twelver Shiism. Twelver Shiites say, well, that's because you're not understanding it correctly, because you're not understanding it through the teachings of the Imams, which explains the real meaning of the Quran. Okay, I understand that, and that's your perspective, but it's not. I mean, for me, as sort of a generally lazy person who doesn't want to put a lot of effort into things, I came to Islam through a very zahir, outward approach, and this just seemed to be the most evident. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think it's impossible to answer your question without debating whether or not the premises in which these two visions of Islam are correct.
Tariq?
Question was related to either of the speakers. It's on matan criticism, and do we ever find in the early period on the major hadith collections, do we ever find that hadith is rejected primarily or solely based on matan criticism, even if the sanad is authentic? Or is it a case, as some people say, that the authenticity of a sanad means that the matan must be correct, and then you then have to either explain it figuratively or literally stop and not think about it? But do we find that do we have an approach to deal with matan criticism that doesn't look at the sanad at all, purely on this? And has anyone ever really done that and rejected hadith purely on matan?
I wrote one article on this, and then another article is coming out, and you may be the only human being who reads two articles. One is a couple of years ago. It's called "How We Know Early Hadith Critics Did Matan Criticism and Why It's So Hard to Find." And the second article coming out soon, inshallah, in Islamic Law Society is "The Rules of Matan Criticism: There Are No Rules." It's like a rock music joke. But the point is, the ilm al-hadith, the science of hadith criticism, is designed to solve the problem of, the Quran says, don't follow what you don't have knowledge of. How do you use your brain to criticize, to find what a prophet said or did, what God says or doesn't say? You have no knowledge, you have no way to understand this. So they developed a system that they thought would allow them to take the reason out of the equation and just use transmission. The problem is that you can never take reason out of the equation, because if you come across a hadith that says something that makes sense, you might just look at the isnad, you criticize, okay, this is sahih. Now you come across something that doesn't make sense to you. Well, I really should look at this isnad. Actually, there is a problem here. So I think that this is not reliable. But the whole reason you stopped and added this additional moment of criticism is because it didn't make sense to your subjective reason, which is culturally determined and personally based on your personal recollections, etc. So you don't see, it's very hard to find in the early period, they don't engage in explicit matan criticism Because that's exactly what the people they were arguing against, the Mu'tazilites, did. So if they were to say, you can find a hadith where the isnad is sahih, but the method is wrong, they would be disproving their own method and agreeing with the opponents, their Mu'tazilite opponents. So they don't do that. It's very rare. I read so much, and I could only come up with a few instances where they'll, Bukhari will say in his Tarikh al-Kabir, for example, that, this hadith, the Prophet supposedly says, don't break apart coins that are in circulation amongst the Jews. He says this is impossible because coins didn't exist in the time of the Prophet, they only existed during the time of al-Malik. Now, I sit there and I read and I say, okay, but how many other hadiths do you have where the Prophet talks about the future? If he knows the future, can know the future, why can't he know the future about coins? Or Imam Muslim in his Kitab Tamiz, there's a hadith that says I think there's 5 surahs of the Quran that each of their value is 1/4 of the Quran. It's just you read it and it's like you read 1/4 of the Quran. And he says this 5/4 is impossible. But if it's not impossible if you think that he's just saying that each one you could have all the surahs could be worth hasanat for the Quran. So in both these situations, you see them using openly this mechanism, but they are also exhibiting the inherent problematic nature of mechanism, which is that it's subjective. Now, in both cases, they also say, here's my comment, but the real problem is that the isnad has this weak narrator. It's only later on, when you get to the 1200s, 1300s, and onward, that you start having people saying very explicitly, لا يلزم صحة المتن صحة المتن لا تلزم من صحة الإسناد وصحة الإسناد لا تستلزم صحة المتن. Now, what that means, they then justify that by saying that they'll say the isnad is sahih, but the hadith is shad. The hadith is shad. It's anomalous. Like the hadith where the Prophet says to the man, my father and your father are in hellfire. This goes against the Ashari principle that you can't be sent to hellfire without they're like Ahlul Fatra. Right? This person hasn't had a chance to be warned. And it's also against what becomes the Ashari Sufi principle that the parents of the Prophet are in heaven. There's lots of books written about this by Sufis and others. Now so the problem is that in theory, one of the conditions for sihha, the authenticness of an isnad, is that it's not shad. The meaning isn't shad. So that, in theory, has already been determined when it was declared to be authentic. So then what you have is this sort of like weird, odd, fiqhi, usuli appropriation of hadith terminology and then slightly misusing it. This is all in this article that I wrote, the 2 articles. If you email me, I can send them to you if you don't want to get them from the journal because you might not have access.
Dr. Brown, sorry, on that, in your article on Mutton criticism, just maybe in direct response to Tariq's question, what about the Sahih Muslim hadith that God created the earth on the 7th day, which has some dispute from other scholars? Would that be a clear example where Muslim says this is Sahih, but then other scholars have disputed that?
It is. It's an example of Metin criticism of someone, especially Hanafis, tended to use this hadith to criticize the Sahihain. But other people have no problem with this hadith. Why? Because you're talking about pre-time. I mean, you're talking about a universe that pre-exists, predates our universe. So, who knows what day means here? God created the earth on Saturday, but he created the world in 6 days, and Saturday is the 7th day. Well, maybe our notion of days of the week isn't applicable to this pre-time environment. It's an example of effectively saying we have to treat it metaphorically.
Shaykh Akram, do you want to add to that, about the Mutton criticism from the early Muhaddithin, please? And there was a brother at the back, I think you, sorry, in the orange, you had your hand up very early on.
Simon, thank you again for your talk. I was just wondering, from Western scholarship, has there been much work on the non-orthodox hadith sources from the Imami or from any of the other non-orthodox sources, or is it just all focused on origins and therefore it's not really looking at sort of later sources from the Imam's works?
There's some scholars, and actually in the UK, people like Robert Lee's written a lot about the Shia Hadith tradition, 12 Shia Hadith tradition. So there are some scholars who are very interested in it. It's from the perspective of the origins issue, authenticity issue. It's some of the non-orthodox, non-Sunni books are very useful if you want to critique Sunni claims about the nature of the early Islamic period. So you'll see very commonly that Shia narrative is used. But a lot of the early hadith, not hadith, but tarikh books, like Abu Mihnaf, Yaqubi, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name. He wrote Waqan Safin. Abu Muzahim Minqari, I think. These scholars, many of them are actually Shiites. So it's interesting, when you look at Tarikh and not Hadith, a lot of the early sources tend to be people who are Shiite anyway. So that material, that's why in a way the early Islamic period is so complicated, has so much evidence to go in a number of directions for a historian, a Western historian, because you see totally clashing narratives of what happened. It's very easy to create a bizarre composite or problematize the issue.
Yeah, sister, I'm going to say we've been very male-dominated. If any of the ladies... Yeah.
Sister with the blue hijab.
I want to ask about the issue that you touched upon, which was the issue of the ahadith, and the fact that they can't be used to base a fatwa on, but they can be used in terms of mawa'idh, in terms of encouraging the use, etc. But what do you think also of their use as an interpretive aid? Because some of the scholars have used them to interpret the Quran, and for example, al-Azami has lots of hadith in it. What do you think in terms of actually using them in this way, and whether you think that might actually skew interpretation? Because, of course, it's not just about akam, but also about general perception. So, for example, some scholars have referred to the hadith on referring or advising, asking for a woman's advice, but going against it. Actually, there is a weak hadith that says this, so you can ask for woman's advice, but you cannot take it. And this actually, in terms of method, this goes against the general ruling in the Quran, which does not specify men or women. But some scholars have used this as an interpretive aid for particular conclusions. So what do you think the role of the hadith should be?
I have my own particular opinion on this issue. So, I personally believe, I take the position of many scholars going back to like Hasan, al-Asqalani, and then modern scholars like Shawkani and Hasan Khan, al-Albani. I don't think unreliable. Anything that is called da'if should not be referred to at all. That's my personal opinion. Because what's the point of having a system that's trying to determine, to limit our understanding of the religion to authentically attributed material, and then you just turn around and use the very material that you determine to not be entirely reliable? Doesn't make any sense to me. Now,